Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. We have amongst us inaugurating the Pearl section of the 69th edition of the San Sebastian Film Festival, the film Competencia Oficial. And we have with us, not Lola Cueras. We have the actors, Antonio Banderas, Oscar Martinez, and the actress Penelope Cruz, producer Jaume Roures, and we have online, we have the directors, Mariano Con and Gaston Duprat. Okay? Yes, a round of applause, yes. Well, as you know, whoever has a question, please raise your hand. Yes, over here. Yes. Hi, congratulations for the film. I thought it was a lot of fun and very adequate for a film, suitable for a festival like this. The actors, do you feel identified with the bit exaggerated scenes in the film, and how? This is a question to the three actors. Well, okay, I'll start. They're not that exaggerated, the scenes we've portrayed. Well, at least in not your case. There are things that happen even worse in the rehearsals. We actors do a lot of stupid things, foolish things at times. Well, let's see. Gaston Duprat and Mariano Con, who are online from Buenos Aires, they got it quite right when criticizing certain behavior in the world of art, and in this case in the world of film in particular. And they go from the forms to all the way through to the content, the way of relating to each other, the actors with the directors, all of the myths that exist vis-a-vis acting, how to obtain the reality in the characters you portray in a film, but they always find a point in which is almost ridiculous, and I've always had the capacity to laugh at that situation. So therefore, in our case, I think we were generous when, with having no complexes when portraying these roles. If anyone were tempted to ask the question whether I feel absolutely identified with the character, I would say no. There are some things in the character that obviously I have them as well. I've lived and I live in Los Angeles. I don't have any women, I don't have any cars, I've never had a Lamborghini, and I never take the full advantage of the death of a colleague to promote my career. Okay, let's start with that, and then my colleagues can help me here, perhaps. Hi. Well, I think the film achieves something which is quite interesting and difficult, to bring out that black humor of the process of preparing the shooting of a film, to achieve humor from situations that were absolutely absurd, but without ridiculing the profession, the preparation of an actor seen from the outside. There are moments in which someone who doesn't form part of our profession may look ridiculous. I think for me, it was very important to set the difference, to explain why this man, when he screams, is bothering his colleague. If that exercise, he needs that for himself. We've all done this. There are moments where we need that, and other actors need other preparatory processes, or something which is much more peculiar or strange. But in this case, what the characters do is to cross that line of respect, to not respect where the other person is or what the other person needs, who may have a preparation system which is completely different to the other. And it was very important for me to see that reflected in the script and in the final result on screen, because there are not too many films. You can make thousands of films upon the life of the shooting of a film, of the things that happen within the shooting of a film, and people don't know. There's a lot to say about this, and there are very good films that have been made about this, and there are very few. I thought that was a very important point, and I think Gaston and Mariano have managed to achieve it completely. Well, there's not much more to add. I think they've said, my colleagues have said absolutely everything. I didn't feel especially identified more than any other character that I've had to portray, independent of where I'm an actor or I'm a plumber. Because our obligation in our work is to identify ourselves and to portray another person. And I've never lived through such extreme situations to identify apart from the one that Penelope just mentioned. Yes, I did live it. The actors who need for their preparation, and not necessarily in films, but also in theater, in plays, to do things that which might distract you or make you laugh, because I don't do those types of things. But as Penelope said very well, if the final result is good, everyone arrives in a different personal way, because the work of an actor is very interior, very subjective, in which conscious, unconscious factors work from the emotional side of thing, intelligence, psychology, intuition. So one's always involved, very involved in what one does, and that's the intention at least. And as I said, if the result ends up being good, well, that's all well and good. It's all well and good that anyone can find the result whichever way one wants to. It has happened to have situations similar to the films, but not as extreme. And I never expressed what a bother it was, as I do, for example, in the script written by Gaston and Mariano. Okay, next question, please, in the back. Remember, photos, please stop taking photos. Thank you. Two questions linked to the issue of the genre of humor for the directors. The general humor, what would this comedy belong to in the genre of humor? The question is also for Mr. Banderas and Penelope Cruz. How do you see the tradition of comedy, especially popular comedy in Spanish films? And excuse me for my savage Spanish and Portuguese mixture. I hope, could you answer those questions? Excuse my accent at the end of the day. Directors first. Hi. Yes, we can hear them very well. I want to say hello to our actors, producers who were there in San Sebastian, first of all. We didn't, with Mariano and Andres, our colleague scriptwriter, to make a comedy, or we were going to do a comedy. No, it ended up, that's the way it ended up, beyond what we wanted to do from the outset. We had a vision of reality that coincide with this type of dramatic comedy with a lot of tension and miscomfort. It's not, we didn't address this from the outset. It was a comedy, and then we did a drama thinking about, no, that's the way we see reality. It ends up being a comedy. It's quite clear that it's a comedy, but we didn't manage the genre to start off with. We like Berlanga's films. We're not a specialists in his work, but what I've seen I loved very much. And in Argentina, there's a director called Shafa Cecido who I like very much, who did one of the emblematic films of Argentinian comedy, which is Esperando de la Carroza, the Chamadoria, who had already passed away. Barano and I like those films, but we're not cinephiles absorbing from cinema specifically. The truth is, it's not. Well, I'm not very up to date, but I recognize that I'm observing reality much more, many more hours a day, and I think that's where it stems from. And perhaps to complete what Gaston was just saying, and to be precise as regards to the search for the tone that we wanted in the film. Initially, or one of the premises when we started was to film a comedy which was uncomfortable, and it's linked to El Hombre al Lado, Ciudadano Ilustre, Obra Maestra, our previous films, but always in complicity with the actors. We didn't want the actors to act as comedy. They acted in drama. And I think that's a sign of very distinctive of what we do in our films. They're acting almost as if it were a documentary, not fiction, and they act in drama. They play dramatic roles, albeit the situation end up being an uncomfortable comedy, and one has to come out of those situations with a very uncomfortable laugh because it's a time bomb, really. I subscribe everything that the directors have just said. I agree with what they've said. It is true. We had the impression, and this was ratified when we saw the film for the first time, it happened to me anyway, of making something that was different. There were parts of a certain tradition of Spanish comedy, perhaps Berlanga, but we were playing formally differently. The spaces were enormous, for example. There were situations that seems that we were making a Swedish film, or it had nothing to do with Spanish comedy at all. There's something that happens in the tradition, not only of Spanish comedy, but international comedy that has to do with political correctness. And the festival in Venice, I talked about this, about the harm received by comedians. It's very complicated to do a comedy without all of a sudden encountering a problem because some collective is going to feel where are the limits of what you can say, what you can't say. It's quite delicate at present. I'm not trying to position myself on one side or the other, but comedy has become something that it's a bit subversive, almost clandestine, depending upon what you talk about and how you express it on the screen. And it is true, nevertheless, that we addressed it always from the work is angry. It's in the background. It's the substance of what we were breathing. Well, yes, we did have a good laugh, but it was very tough. It was very tough. And it is a metaphor of that jungle which we call life. The bonfire of the vanities of the struggle of the centuries, which forms part of the world of cinema, but it describes a universe which goes much further than that. And for me, comedy is a genre that I've always been fascinated with. I've been quite fortunate to be able to touch upon it with Rafael Azcona, who was a genius in the Azcona family and the Trueba family as well, and several times in the world of Almodóvar as well, albeit I've done much more drama than comedy with him, but we have done some comedy, and I'm not afraid of, I equally am afraid of comedy and drama. I'm much more, the timing of comedy is so delicate, obviously, and it seems that it's something that you know, but I'm not too sure whether the audience is really aware of this. There's something that makes you laugh and makes you leave the film theater with a very light feeling, and it seems that it was much easier to do it or to portray it, but such is not the case. And in the case of Mariano Gaston, I admire their work very much, especially for the Ciudadano Ilustre and Oscar's great work in it, because they're very wise when laughing of what is absurd, and this is something, it is becoming almost their speciality, and I think they do it with a great charm and intelligence, which is quite attractive. In fact, we've got future plans to follow that direction.
Hola a todos.
Hi, everyone. I would like to ask whether to make a film like Competencia Oficial, you've got to feel like playing quite a lot of playing, of letting your hair down to play this game, which the actors liked a lot, and then to let your hair down, really. How did the directors get in touch with you and to talk about the characters and to allow you were probably astonished at the beginning. And Penelope, I'd like to ask you, were talking about letting your hair down, whether that hair helped you to compose your character, a character that, no matter how much I think about it, I can't believe in what director you may have inspired yourself, Penelope or the directors themselves. Thank you. In a bit, it was a work, Mariano, Gaston, and myself. We had a few people in our heads. They were not always women, and we're not going to reveal any identities, obviously. And the truth is, it was done. We paid tribute very kindly. I'm not too sure. It's a type of a Frankenstein that we've constructed based upon, first of all, in what was imaginary, what they wrote on the script, and other people who we do know. During the makeup and hairdressing, there was a box with wigs, and I took that one, and there was no way going back. And they weren't afraid at all when they reacted just like myself. They fell in love with that look. This woman, she walks in the door, and you already feel like running out the door. So we're doing things well. I'm not too sure whether the directors want to add anything there. The construction of that character, we did it all together. It's a film where the actors were much more involved than just acting. From the script to the staging, we were always discussing what we were going to do in favor of the film. In the case of Penelope's character, it's as if she knew what a conventional director. It's more like she's an artistic artist or a performer. She's a director who's an artist at the same time. Sometimes directors are very more down to earth, much more specific or concrete, and much clearer. That's why we gave attributes of an artist, a conceptual artist, to the director, but a more avant-garde artist. So what Penelope composes for me is extraordinary, because she's got a character that's got a lot of different faces. She's authoritarian, she's fragile, she's in line, she's a despot, she's great. She's all of that together. So you never know what she's thinking at any time on the screen, and that allows the other screen, gives a lot of fear to the actress and also the audience. What is the character bringing in to that scene? I think obviously the wig helped very much. Also, when filming and writing the script, we wrote with Andres, but it was an ensemble piece where everyone put in their quota of poison, so to speak, and each actor contributed as well. And there's also a premise prior to shooting, which was to enjoy ourselves when we were shooting the film. Making a film is something which is very boring generally, practically in every case, and where a long time waiting, the actors have to wait between one scene and another, go to the trailer for another scene, and it's only 1 minute of scene per day. These scenes were very long, with a camera that had a position with a perspective for it to be aesthetic, and where the actors could let themselves go and enjoy themselves, and they could interact. We didn't want to cut that out. And I think that spontaneity is portrayed in the film. The unique moments, these are long scenes. All of the scenes and all of the takes were treated like master scenes, and they lasted for 12 minutes. And this can only be done with actors of the caliber and generosity of Oscar, Antonio, and Penelope. That is why, for me, what they do in front of the screen, in front of the camera, when you see it as an audience, it's a masterwork of performance by the three of them. I was going to refer to the first part of the film, which Mariano responded to. Obviously, we felt like enjoying ourselves, and the script, the truth was, offered a very attractive menu for portraying our roles, not only because of the genre, because of the nature of the universe that we were talking about. This was very empathic to us, and it made us have more fun. For example, just like Mariano said, it's not easy in films to have such long scenes or sequences performing without the intermediation of any type. there are 9 rehearsals where these characters are on their own with time to allow the performance to fly. And that's not too frequent in making films, and even more as we're 2 actors with a director of this nature. I think for the 3 of us, I know that for Antonio, for myself, who had to suffer Lola, it was a lot of very attractive and a lot of fun. In fact, there was a moment we had to stop shooting because we started to laugh and we couldn't continue. So for Penelope, I would like to ask Penelope, now that you've just won the Volpi Cup and you've received the Donostia Award, and this week we've quite enviously looked about Jean-Paul Belmondo's tribute. Marion Cotillard talked about the French film protecting their culture, whether you feel that Spain is a country that protects and recognizes its culture and the achievements of its artists. Well, it depends on the time of the season. I'm not too sure whether to understand how I understand it, whether there are waves where you receive all types of sensation. What doesn't change is what you receive in the street, because I receive a lot of kindness and respect when I'm outside in the street. So you live in your city and you get used to that. It's as if you knew everyone and everyone knows who you are. So therefore people aren't surprised in seeing you. But if you're asking me at different levels to what extent we support or don't support our sector, that's a bit more delicate. And it depends upon the season or the year. It depends on who's there at that time, at that given moment, and who decides that we have to remember there are many, many families who live from this profession, and that it's only the 3 or 4 privileged people who have the possibility of choosing the projects that we make every day. I know that my colleagues, it happens to them every day. We have to get up and to know that that's an enormous privilege, and that's not normal. And it's very important to remind myself of this every day. But beyond that, it's something that's ever-changing, but it's a profession like many other professions, also needs a lot of support. And even more so at this time, coming from where we've come from over the last couple of years. At the end of the day, no. It's much more complicated. Sometimes we actors feel that we're being used. That's what is true, is that France in particular takes its cultural heritage and cultural identity and symbols takes care of them very well. And Belmondo was just an example of this. I coincided when Yves Montand died in Paris, and it was because there wasn't any COVID. It was impressive what happened. Hundreds and thousands of people. They walked him through the streets. People were throwing flowers on his coffin, and it was a tribute of France, of the French nation, to Yves Montand. How they know how to defend and protect their cultural identity. They're the creators of intellectual property, for example, so in that sense, they're people that we should imitate, because at the end of the day, it's not only a tribute or praise for the artists or the family members that are praised, but it's a community that recognizes itself in that class of artists and popular figures, and in that class of tributes that they pay. And that brings about an identity in the culture of a nation. I agree with you. And just a few nuances to what Penelope just said, on what it's being out on the street, people out in the street, and how you are treated, and the kindness you receive out in the street. But the truth is, in the last general elections, the debates on TV, there wasn't one single word referred to culture. No one, zero, referred to culture, no cinema, no theater, no painting, no literature, or nothing at all. So therefore, Of course, when one travels to another country and you see those things that Oscar has just mentioned, described, or you feel, okay, you feel left to one side, as my mother would say. Okay, first of all, I want to thank you. The great diversity, genre diversity, gender roles in the, especially of the of what you portray in the film for the whole cast and the crew, the directors, how you worked upon the script and the characters in pre-production or prior to shooting it, in order to represent the sexual diversity and gender diversity we see in the film, and secondly, what need do you see in this film and films such as this in today's society to accept, or to at least accept, gender and sexual diversity? Thank you. Do you want to directors? You want the directors to answer first, please? At no time did we address that as an imposition when writing the script or shooting the film, and neither is it a cliche that we had to fill in when we started to write the script. The answer is that we worked upon that or not. No, we didn't. There was a second question there. Sorry, we can't hear the question without a microphone. There's a question upon the need in films of representing gender diversity. Quite probably, if the film focuses upon this, the need is absolute, quite logically, if the message that we're trying to convey is that. But in this field, quite obviously, there are moments where you're going to find very sexist attitudes, like my character, because the way he acts with women, and there are other aspects that can be dealt with in the film. But I think that what Gaston was trying to say, I have the impression, is that at no time did we address it that way. We're describing a situation which is quite specific, and according to, as the different stories and plots and subplots and characters and events in the film arise, that is dealt with one way or another. Quite often, the character could make you laugh because a very sexist action. Well, we're addressing it as a critique, and that to a certain extent, when somebody at the beginning of the press conference, the identification with the characters. One thing is that we can laugh at ourselves doing a certain thing. Another thing is that I believe ideologically what I'm representing. These are two things which are completely different. The same in the film. The film has different ways of communicating stories without gender diversity being the main issue. It could be within the subplot number 15 of the film, but it's not the fundamental element within that story. That obviously, because society that we're living in is taking leaps forward, and there are many films that obviously are also address this as a subplot, which is at level 3 or level 4. This is something that is happening, yes. Okay, the truth is, we would stick around, we would stay here talking much more about the importance of films and links to other films, so we have to finish here. And a big round of applause for all of the cast and crew of